Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
That night, Lucho's dreams were so vivid that when he woke up, he thought, "Well, that's it, I've drunk too much. Hallucinations have already begun." His head was pounding so hard that he couldn't muster the strength to get out of bed. He slowly rolled onto his side and got up. There were some pills somewhere. He pulled out the drawer of the nightstand and started searching inside with his hand. Dissolving a tablet in a glass of water, Lucho drank it and lay down again. His father, on this night, had a dream about his father. He was angry with his son, scolding and reproaching him for how he had treated his mother. "You're selfish and mean," his father said, and Lucho stood before him, just like many years ago, in childhood, not daring to look up. "Your mother spent her whole life raising you. She never bought an extra dress for herself, saying I'll get by, and you." The dream was so vivid that Lucho almost physically felt the slap his father gave him. At that moment, his mother should have intervened on his behalf. She always protected him from everyone, calmed his father when he got angry, stood up for him in front of teachers at school, scolded the neighboring boys who took his bike away. But where was his mother? She wasn't in this dream. She never came to save her son, and the realization of this sent a chill through him. Fear gripped his entire body, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. Lucho woke up, drenched in cold sweat. He hadn't seen his mother for 5 years. Maybe she died, he thought. And the thought made his head pound even harder. Lucho slowly surveyed the room. Gradually, he began to remember everything that had happened the day before. Yesterday, bailiffs had showed up at the office with a notice that the company no longer belonged to Lucho. The accounts were frozen, and he had to vacate the apartment within 10 days. "Have you all gone mad?" Senor Montero shouted. "Get out of here, or I'll call security." Lucho reached for the phone to call the head of security, but the man in uniform handed him the decree. "What's this? What are you giving me these papers for? Get out." As he read what was printed on the white sheet, Lucho became bewildered. The paper stated that the new owner of the company was Senora Marina Morales Navarro. "Wait a minute," he said in a more conciliatory tone. "Can I call the owner, this Senora Morales mentioned here? I'll try to figure everything out. I know her." "Please do," the man in uniform said indifferently. "Just try not to take too long. We're on duty." Lucho dialed Marina's number nervously, not understanding what had happened and why she was the owner of his company. This must be some kind of mistake, he thought. For a moment, he thought he was being pranked, like on that famous TV show. He half expected the door to open and a film crew to walk in. Everyone would shout in unison, "It's a prank." In the receiver, a polite voice said, "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." "Damn." Luis cursed. "You can only take your personal belongings. Everything else must stay in the office." Seeing that his attempts to reach the new owner led to nothing, the bailiff pointed Lucho to the door. "Please." Still not understanding anything, the man headed to the door. As he left, he muttered, "I'll call the lawyers. I'll figure it all out. This is some kind of misunderstanding." "That's your right," the man in uniform calmly replied, locking the door behind Lucho. "Goodbye." As Luis stepped out of the office, he dialed Gabriel's number. Gabriel was a childhood friend. "Gabby, we need to meet," the man said when he heard his friend's voice on the other end. "I'm in trouble." "No problem, buddy," Gabriel replied. "Where and when?" "Let's meet at our bar on the embankment." "Come as soon as possible." "Agreed, I'll be there." When Gabby entered the door of the drinking establishment, Lucho had already almost emptied a bottle of whiskey. "Will you have a drink?" he asked his friend and, without waiting for an answer, poured the remnants into a glass. "Boss, bring another one and some snacks." "You look like a mess, buddy," Gabby criticized his friend. "What's the occasion for the bender?" "You won't believe it. Today I was kicked out of my own office. And they also said that the accounts are frozen." and I have to vacate the apartment. I don't understand, Gabby calmly replied. He took a sip from his glass and snacked lemon. Everything seemed to be fine with you, no problems. That's what I don't understand, Lucho replied, his tongue already stumbling. But the most important thing, my friend. You don't know the most important thing. They showed me a paper according to which I am no longer the owner of the company. And guess who the new owner is? Gabby looked at his friend with interest while Lucho poured whiskey from the bottle brought by the waiter. After downing the whiskey, trying to focus his gaze, he looked into Gabby's eyes. The new owner of the company is Sonora Morales. He pronounced these words mockingly, slowly, deliberately stretching each syllable so that Gabby would understand more quickly. You're Marina? Gabby seemed surprised. How is that possible? Did you transfer the company to her? Are you an idiot or what? As if I don't already fully support her with her boutiques, spa salons, and resorts abroad. It never even crossed my mind. Then how did she become the owner of the company, the money, and your apartment? Gabby took a sip as well. How should I know? Lucho slammed his fist on the table, attracting the attention of other bar patrons. The security guard by the door tensed up, ready to throw the overindulgent visitor out if necessary. Let's go ask her, he suggested. He took out his smartphone, dialed Marina's number, which was labeled as my beloved in his contacts, but the subscriber was still unavailable. The damn creature isn't answering. The man cursed. Maybe at the spa? Gabby suggested. Usually, the girls turn off their phones there. To hell with her. Lucho poured drinks again. The next morning, he could barely remember what happened afterward. Seeing that the man had consumed quite a bit, to avoid unnecessary trouble, the security guard asked the friends to leave. Lucho protested, trying to fight with security. Gabby was persistently dragging him outside, with the help of the security guard. Gabriel stuffed Lucho into a taxi and sat in the front seat himself, and after that, Lucho didn't remember anything. He woke up in his own bed, realizing that it was no longer his. Slapping his bare feet on the floor, the man headed to the kitchen. Hoping there was something to drink in the fridge, he opened the door. Damn it, Gabby, what a friend you are. Could have left me something for a hangover, Lucho thought, finding nothing to help him recover. With a heavy sigh, he headed to the shower to somehow ease his condition and get back to normal. The water streams refreshed him. At some point, Lucho's memory reminded him that the papers provided by the bailiffs said nothing about his car. I think I'll go see Marina myself. Let her explain how she so cleverly took over my company, the man thought, wiping himself with a fluffy towel. He quickly had a cup of coffee, put on jeans and a t-shirt, and left his apartment. There was no car in the yard. Lucho remembered that he had left it near the office. Getting to the office center by taxi, he was delighted to see his Jeep in the parking lot. From the car, the man decided to call the office. I'm listening, Senor Montero, a friendly voice answered on the other end. Is anyone in my office? He asked. No, I'm alone in the reception. No one has come, she replied. When will you be here? Without answering the girl's question, he asked another one. Was Marina there? No. I told you, there's no one here. All right, keep working, Lucho paused for a moment. Actually, listen, close up and go home. Rest for now. I'll call when there's news. The man turned the key in the ignition and left the parking lot. He was determined. This creature would explain everything to him now, tell him everything. He trusted her as much as he trusted himself. How did she manage to pull all this off with him? The Jeep was speeding along the avenue, overtaking cars and buses. And Lucho imagined how Marina would tell him. Darling, it was just a joke. And everything would return to its place. Entering the entrance of the building where his lover lived, Lucho pressed the elevator call button, but it still wasn't coming. He waited a little and decided to climb to the 8th floor by stairs. The call to the girl's apartment sounded with a cheerful trill. No one answered. Lucho pressed the button again. Finally, the door opened. Marina was standing in the doorway. "You? What are you doing here?" she asked. But Lucho pushed her aside and walked inside. "You tell me what you're doing. Yesterday, I found out that you took my company and my apartment, and you also took over my bank accounts." The man walked into the living room. Marina followed him, quickly tying her robe. "Why are you silent? Why are you looking at me like that?" The girl looked at Lucho with confusion and fear in her eyes. Unexpectedly, the bedroom door opened and Gabby walked out. Now, confusion appeared in Lucho's eyes. "And you? What are you doing here?" he asked his friend, taken aback by his appearance. "As you can see, I was sleeping," Gabby replied. "But why are you here?" Lucho still didn't understand. Gabriel went to the bar, took out a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. He uncorked it slowly, poured the red liquid, handed a glass to Marina, and took a sip from the other. "Shall we have a drink?" He nodded towards the glass. "I'm driving," Lucho replied. The absurdity of the situation prevented him from fully understanding what was happening. But the worst part, he had already begun to realize. His best friend was sleeping with his girlfriend, and somehow his girlfriend had deprived him of everything he had earned over the past few years. "Can you explain something to me?" Lucho slumped onto the couch, folded his arms across his chest, and prepared to listen to explanations from his lover and friend. "I'm asking both of you." He raised his voice, looking at both the girl and Gabriel. "And you don't need to yell here," Gabby calmly said, "since you're not at home. Besides, you don't have any home now. The apartment, as well as the company, belongs to Marina. So, it's not in your best interest to assert your rights here. If you behave well, we'll give you some money for the time being." "We? You're going to give me money?" Lucho jumped off the couch, grabbed Gabby by the neck, and started shaking him. But Gabriel pushed him away with such force that he returned to his previous position in an instant. He covered his head with his hands. Everything that was happening seemed like a terrible dream, a nightmare, madness. "So, it was you who pulled all this off? You left me with nothing?" Finally, it dawned on Lucho that everything that was happening was not a joke, not a prank. "And what do you think?" Gabby sarcastically asked. "Marina wouldn't have gone for it herself. As you understand, she's not very bright. But she has many other talents. Right, Marina?" Gabriel hugged the girl by the waist and held her tightly. He looked like the winner next to the dejected, swollen Lucho. "How could you, Gabby?" "We've been friends since childhood," Lucho asked in a quiet voice. "Friends?" Gabriel released Marina and approached Lucho, leaning over him. His gaze turned malicious and sharp. "Do friends behave like that? You always acted like a king. Always took the best for yourself, and I had to settle for what was left. You had the best girls, clothes. You even got a car from your parents in your first year. I was always your shadow. Always rushed to help when you cried, 'Gabby, help.' But yesterday was the last time. What are you saying? Shut up and listen. Now, I will be in charge of the company. Marina is just a formal figurehead. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to take your business. After all, you fell head over heels in love with her, fool. Besides, you've always let your emotions lead you and couldn't think with your head. And you're too talkative and overconfident. There's no self-preservation instinct in you, Lucho. And in this day and age, you can't trust anyone. Do you hear me? Not even the one you spend your nights with. And you, our dear Lucho, you love to brag about your achievements. So, how much do you need for the time being? I'm not greedy. I can throw in a few thousands from your former accounts. Get lost." Lucho got up from the couch, glared angrily at his now former friend, then turned his gaze to Marina. "A doormat. Just as you were before, you remain one. Do you think he needs you? He'll trade you for another chick with longer legs at the first opportunity. That's enough, Gabriel interrupted Lucho. Get out of here. Go on, get lost, and make sure we never see you again. Gabby pushed Lucho towards the exit. Back in his apartment, he took out a suitcase and started packing his things. In the shower, the man's mind was filled with black filth, a vile, disgusting, unbearable filth. Rolling the suitcase into the hallway, Lucho returned to the bedroom and opened the safe. Fortunately, he had the sense to keep some cash. He packed several bundles of money into the suitcase, opened the door, and left the apartment. There was nowhere for the man to go. He wandered the city for several hours, thinking, maybe I'll live somewhere at a vacation resort by the bay. The idea was not bad in itself, but Lucho didn't want to be alone. He needed to talk to someone, and in solitude in nature, the only interlocutor could be a bottle. He definitely didn't want to drink. Unconsciously, he drove out of the city. A nightmare from the night before came to mind. Why hadn't his mother appeared in his dream? She always stood up for Lucho when his father scolded him. Was she still alive? The decision came naturally. He would go to that remote village where he had taken his mother 5 years ago. It was time to apologize for everything, to repent for getting rid of an aging woman, to live for his own pleasure, to kneel and beg for forgiveness. Please, Mom, stay alive. Lucho's mother, Josefa, was originally from Canada. Her parents lived in a village on the shores of a lake near a nature reserve. They worked on a collective farm. Unlike other families with 5 to 6 children, Josefa's parents were not a large family. After giving birth to a daughter, Josefa's mother underwent a complex operation and could no longer have children. Her father, who always wanted to have several sons, eventually resigned himself to the situation. But Peppa grew up surprisingly obedient. She helped her father and mother in everything, fetching water, chopping firewood, weeding the garden. Gradually, her father even started taking her hunting and fishing. Her mother, on the other hand, tried to teach her woman skills. On long winter evenings, they were spinning the yarn together, knitted and sewed warm things, socks, mittens, hats, vests. After finishing school, Peppa was planning to move to the capital. The village was slowly dying as the youth dispersed. Homes aged and became abandoned without their owners. As the children settled in cities, they took their elderly parents with them. Upon hearing her daughter's plans, Peppa's mother prayed. "Daughter, how will we manage without you? Who will bring us a glass of water in our old age? Once I enroll in a vocational school or a technical college, graduate, get a job, I'll be able to help you." "Don't cry, mother," her father said. "There's really nothing for the girl to do here. I heard the post office is closing soon too. We'll have to drive 40 kilometers to get our pensions. Let her go. God willing, she'll make something of herself, and everything will work out." Having resigned herself, Peppa's mother helped pack her daughter's belongings, and on the appointed day, she and her father took her to the railway station on their motorcycle with a sidecar. A month later, they received a telegram, "Mom, Dad, I've been accepted into the technical college." Tears welled up in her mother's eyes, and her father tried to comfort her. "Our Peppa isn't a fool. She'll learn, become a decent person. Maybe she'll take us to live with her." "Where would we go, Father, in the capital?" The mother sobbed. "How can we leave our own farm behind?" Peppa got used to life in the capital. After completing her college, she found work in the personnel department of a factory. That's where she met her husband. He was a foreman in the workshop. For over a year, he courted the girl. He was 10 years older, which made Peppa quite shy around this mature man. However, he was persistent, and after a year and a half, Peppa and Raoul got married, having a modest wedding ceremony. Then, 3 years later, the factory management allocated an apartment to the young couple. That's when they started thinking about having children. However, years passed, and Peppa didn't become pregnant. Doctors said she was perfectly healthy and couldn't understand why the couple couldn't conceive. 10 years had passed since Peppa left her native village and moved away from her parents. She wrote letters to them regularly. Her parents wrote back, but going to visit them was out of the question. The city wouldn't let her go, with its frantic pace of life. Nonetheless, Peppa returned to the village, but the occasion was far from joyful. One day, she received a telegram from her father informing her that her mother had passed away. Taking leave from work, she and her husband bought train tickets and set off for the funeral. Walking through the village streets towards her childhood home, Peppa was amazed by how everything had changed. The windows of the once sturdy houses were boarded up, the gardens showed no sign of flowering plants, and there were no cows or clucking hens in the yards. The village was slowly dying. At the gate of her father's house, a few neighbors stood, mostly elderly men and women wearing black scarves on their heads. Peppa entered the house. A coffin stood on stools, and her mother lay inside. The young woman cried as she sat down next to her. She gently caressed her mother's head and hands, studying her peaceful expression. Her mother seemed to be deeply asleep, but there would be no awakening from this slumber. After the memorial service, when the neighbors had dispersed, Peppa and Raoul remained at the table with her father. "That's how it is, daughter, our mother is gone," the man said quietly. "She was ill, that's understandable. What's sad is that she didn't get to see her grandchildren." "Dad, we just can't seem to have children," Peppa complained. She noticed her husband's reproachful glance and lowered her eyes. "What do the doctors say? Are they clueless?" her father asked. "They say we're both healthy," Peppa shrugged. "It seems our time to become parents hasn't come yet." "It's not about time," her father sighed. "Sins have a way of sticking around." "What sins could we have, Dad?" Peppa asked, agitated. "Maybe not you, but perhaps your ancestors did. Sin can span many generations. You might not hear its echoes right away, but it would be worth repenting for the sins of your forebears. All right, it's time for bed. I'll go close up the livestock, and you two get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." The next morning, her father woke the sleeping couple and led his daughter and son-in-law into the forest. They walked along a narrow path for a long time until they reached a waterfall. A powerful stream of water fell from a high cliff, creating a rainbow fountain of splashes. In the sunlight, the drops played with different colors, scattering fine mist in all directions. In the basin at the base of the waterfall, the water calmed down, allowing them to see their reflected faces, slightly distorted by the moving air. "Take off your clothes," her father ordered. "Dip into the water 3 times and make the sign of the cross." "But I haven't been baptized," Raoul tried to protest. The entire ritual seemed like nonsense to him. "Then just say, 'Lord, forgive me,' 3 times, her father said firmly, smoothing his gray beard. "Maybe he'll hear you, you godless man." Peppa and Raoul descended to the basin of the waterfall and did as her father instructed. They returned home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. At dinner, her father said, "The old folks used to say that if someone in the family dies, and a child is born in the same year, it means the Lord has forgiven all the sins of the deceased. God is merciful, He will forgive our mother, and bless you with a child." Raoul looked surprised at his father-in-law, and Peppa only said, "God willing, Dad, God willing." A month later, the woman found out she was pregnant, and in May, she and her husband welcomed a wonderful baby boy named Lucho. The couple was overjoyed, their souls filled with happiness at the arrival of their son. However, the joy of their son's birth was clouded by the news of Peppa's father's death, which they received from neighbors after his funeral. Over the 10 childless years, they managed to save up some money, so immediately after their son's birth, Peppa and Raoul bought a cooperative 3-room apartment in a newly built complex, where a separate room was allocated for Lucho. Raoul quickly snapped out of the initial euphoria of becoming a father. He was determined to teach his son about hard work, responsibility, and the ability to stand up for himself. But Peppa continued to hover around him like a mother hen. "You're too strict with our son, Raoul," she would tell her husband, who made their 3-year-old son take out the trash. He's still so little. It's not a big deal. If he can lift a cup, he can carry a small bucket as well, Raul replied, determined to raise their child to be responsible and self-sufficient. On weekends, the father would take his son to the park for a run, make him do push-ups and pull-ups on the bars, and at the age of 5, he enrolled him in a boxing class. However, after his son came home with a black eye from one of his training sessions, the mother flatly refused to take him to boxing anymore. "Do you want to turn our only son into a cripple?" she protested, countering her husband's arguments that the boy needed to grow up to be a man. Raul loved his wife immensely, and he found it difficult to argue with her. He tried to avoid any cause for conflict and, in most cases, Peppa managed to win the right to raise their son as she saw fit. Lucho never experienced refusal in anything. The best toys, a bicycle, and stylish clothes from brand name stores, all of it was readily available to him, almost as if it was a given. However, Lucho was not a dull child. He performed well in school, consistently earning solid B's. Teachers praised him as a clever student. The only area where he struggled was discipline. With his friend Gabriel, who lived in the neighboring building, they were always coming up with new pranks. Once, they bought a rat at a pet store and placed it in the teacher's desk drawer. When she opened it to get her notebooks, she nearly fainted. Peppa was called to the principal's office. Blushing, she apologized for her son's behavior and promised to have a serious talk with him at home. The next day, Lucho and Gabriel broke a window in the teacher's lounge by throwing a basketball through it. That's when Peppa had to tell everything to her husband. The principal sternly ordered an immediate replacement of the broken window pane, and it was beyond the woman's capabilities. As punishment, Lucho was not allowed to go outside for a whole week. During spring break, he sat at home, watching other kids playing outside through the window. Nevertheless, Lucho's childhood was no worse than that of other children. On his 9th class, parents have bought him a moped, and after completing his first year of college, his father bought him a brand new car. His parents loved him with all their hearts, and despite their efforts to raise him with discipline, they indulged his growing demands. After finishing college with a degree in economics, Lucho got a job at a large trading company. "I don't plan on toiling away for someone else my whole life," he would tell his parents. "Once I gain enough experience and learn the ropes, I'll start my own business." By that time, his father had already retired but continued working. After a long professional journey from a regular worker to a department head and eventually to the production manager, he believed that trading was a frivolous endeavor. The man repeatedly urged his son to work at the factory in the planning and economics department, but Lucho always brushed off the suggestion. "Not a chance. Your factory is a relic of the past," Lucho would say. "The future is in business." His father would simply shake his head. He believed that business was filled with nothing but gangsters, and an honest person should work for the good of their homeland. That's how he lived, going to the factory gate every morning until the very last day. He fell asleep one day and never woke up. He passed away peacefully in his sleep. That year, Lucho turned 30 years old. After his father's funeral, Lucho felt like the head of the family and believed it was his time to make decisions. He left the trading company, spending day and night in his room in front of his computer. One day, he said to his mother, "I know you and Dad had some savings. I've decided to start my own business and I need some money." "How much do you need?" Josefa asked. "The more, the better. I need to rent an office, buy office equipment, and get some initial inventory." "Of course, my son, I'll give you the money," Josefa agreed, not accustomed to denying Lucho. Within a year, Lucho became the director of a trading company. While it didn't generate extraordinary profits, it ran quite successfully. He had several dozen employees on staff, and he paid them their salaries on time, even offering bonuses and vacation packages to those who excelled. He didn't rush to repay the money his mother had given him to start the business, and Josefa never asked for it. She was just happy that her son was doing what he loved, and it was successful. As time passed, one day Lucho returned home and told his mother, Today, I'll be bringing a girl home as my guest. Prepare something for dinner." Josefa smiled. She had been eagerly waiting for the day when Lucho would decide to get married. Their house had been empty except for his childhood friend Gabriel, whom they had been close to since they were kids. And now, suddenly, Lucho was bringing a girl home. Perhaps they would even announce their engagement. Josefa would definitely bless the young couple to ensure their life together was filled with happiness. She was eager to spoil her grandchildren. Her son was over 30 years old, and he hadn't even thought about having children yet. Lucho met Marina at a club. The striking girl in a tight-fitting dress immediately caught his attention. She was radiant and had a provocative look about her. She was what some would describe as legs for days or a stunning beauty. She was seated at the bar, sipping a cocktail slowly. "Got bored?" Lucho asked as he sat down next to her. Marina gave him an appraising look. It seemed that she liked the young man. He was dressed decently and looked attractive. When he took his wallet out of his pocket, pulled out a large bill, handed it to the barman, and said, "I'll have a whiskey, and the lady will have the same," the beauty flashed a radiant smile. "I'm Lucho," he introduced himself. "Marina," she replied, stretching her name slightly. "Are you here alone? Why do you want to know?" The girl was clearly flirting with her new acquaintance. Out of genuine interest, Lucho replied, placing his hand on Marina's waist. "Be careful," she warned. "I might hurt you." "Really? Such a sweet, charming girl like you hurting a poor, lonely guy like me? I'll never believe it," Lucho tried to joke. "How about getting to know each other?" He took a sip, pushed the glass away, and said to the barman, "Boss, one more round, please." Marina sipped her cocktail slowly, keeping her eyes on the man. "Are you alone?" she asked. "Not entirely. My friend and I decided to meet up, have a good time, you know." "All work and no play," Lucho replied, downing another shot of whiskey. "Poor, hard-working Lucho," Marina teased, wearing a playful expression. "Where does poor, tired Lucho work so hard?" "Poor Lucho is working in his own company." "Wait, why do I keep saying poor Lucho?" "Lucho is definitely not poor, he's quite wealthy, actually," the man's speech began to slightly slurred. "Oh, here's my friend, Gabby." Gabriel approached the bar. Lucho introduced Gabby to his new girlfriend, and the group moved to a table in the club. Lucho noticed that he was growing fonder of Marina, and his attraction was directly proportional to the amount he drank. The club was closing by the time the group spilled out onto the street. Marina wrapped her arms around Lucho's neck and whispered, "Do you want to continue the evening?" "I'd love to," Lucho mumbled. "Then let's go to my place." "Do you have something to drink there?" he asked, pulling Marina closer by her slender waist. "We'll find something," she assured him. Lucho spent the night at Marina's, and in the morning, as he reluctantly lifted his head from the pillow, he decided to call Gabby. He needed a way to get back home, and Gabby hadn't consumed as much alcohol the previous night. Maybe he could ask his friend for a ride. Long beeps echoed through the phone when Lucho dialed Gabby's number. There was no answer. "Are you up, honey?" "Good morning." Marina sweetly stretched in bed. She reached for the nightstand, where an opened bottle of champagne stood, poured herself a glass, drank it, and offered some to Lucho. "Want some? It'll help with your headache." "Do you have anything stronger?" Lucho asked. "No," Marina shook her head, letting her hair spread across the pillow. "All right, since I have no way to get home," Lucho agreed. "How about a taxi? Or do you just not want to leave?" Marina beckoned him with her finger. Lucho collapsed into the arms of the beauty. Finally, after pulling away from each other, they lay silently, breathing heavily. Lucho was the first to break the silence. "I'm feeling hungry. Can you make something to eat?" No, absolutely no cooking. I can't stand the kitchen and everything related to it," the girl firmly refused. how about we go somewhere and have lunch? Where? A restaurant, for example. All right, let's do it. Lucho decided that this wonderful night had to have a beautiful ending. I just need to make one call. Sure, I'll take a shower. Marina wrapped herself in the sheet and walked down the corridor. Josefa was rushing home from work. She needed to stop by the store to buy some cheese and sausage. Today, her son would introduce his girlfriend to her. The thought brought joy to her heart. Most likely, the girl was from his workplace. Surely, she must be intelligent, kind, and incredibly beautiful. Josefa couldn't imagine her son dating just anyone. After changing into home clothes, she put on an apron and started preparing dinner. Josefa placed a marinated chicken into the oven, a dish she had prepared earlier in the day, and began working on appetizers. In the living room, she set a beautiful table with a tablecloth, dishes, and cutlery. Josefa was almost finished when the doorbell rang. She hurried to the entrance. "Mom, we're here," Lucho greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. "Let me introduce you to Marina." "Nice to meet you," the woman replied, smiling as she examined the young woman. She looked nothing like the image of the future daughter-in-law that Josefa had painted in her imagination. Bright, tall, in a short skirt. "I'm Sonora Nieto." The girl smiled in response, but remained silent. She seemed interested in examining the spacious hallway. "Why are we just standing here? Please come into the living room," Josefa invited her son and his girlfriend. "I'll be right there." The woman went into the kitchen, and Marina continued to look around, her head turning from side to side. "You have a nice apartment here. Do you two live here together?" "Yes, my father passed away, and it's just me and my mom now," Lucho replied as he uncorked a bottle of champagne. "Why aren't you married?" the girl asked. "It just never crossed my mind. Maybe I haven't met that special someone I'd want to spend my life with yet," the man replied. "Are you sure? Or maybe your mom doesn't allow it." Marina laughed, and Lucho looked at her, not sure if she was joking or genuinely considering him a mama's boy. "Stop it, I have a wonderful mom. I don't doubt it for a second, don't worry." The girl hugged Lucho around the neck and kissed him. Josefa entered the room. When she saw the young couple, she felt slightly flustered. "Well, everything's ready. Please, have a seat at the table." In the woman's hands was a dish of roasted chicken. It smells delicious, Mom. I love it when you roast chicken your way." "Thank you, my son," Josefa replied. Trying to ease the slightly tense atmosphere at the table, she turned to Marina. "And what do you like to cook, Mari? Share a recipe with us." Marina looked puzzled at the woman and then at Lucho. "I don't like cooking anything," she replied. "I prefer to dine out in restaurants, or at the very least, order ready-made food for delivery." Now it was Josefa's turn to be surprised. "Well, how can that be? How will you feed your husband and children? It's widely known that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. This wisdom works, believe me. So did you marry Lucho's father thanks to your chicken roasting skills?" Marina asked without embarrassment, reaching for the salad. Josefa froze for a moment, her mouth still full. She found the question rude and tactless. The smile slowly faded from her face. She looked at Marina, who was serving herself salad without realizing she had said something inappropriate. Sensing the awkwardness of the situation, Lucho tried to smooth it over. "Mom, Marina meant to say that you cook really well, and my dad couldn't help but fall in love with such a great homemaker." He looked at Marina, who, realizing her slip, nodded. Yes, that's what I meant to say," she said, continuing to chew. Dinner conversation didn't improve. After coffee and cake, Lucho and Marina prepared to leave. "I'll see Marina off and be right back." He gave his mother a peck on the cheek, and she continued to clear the table. She didn't bid farewell to their guest, clearly displaying her displeasure with her son's choice. When her son returned home, Josefa was already getting ready for bed. She had taken a sedative earlier. The woman couldn't get over Marina, who had struck her as ill-mannered, rude, and provocatively dressed. She was nothing like the daughter-in-law Josefa had envisioned. "Mom, you're not asleep yet?" Lucho asked, peering into his mother's bedroom. "You'll fall asleep here, my dear," she sighed. "Your friend's visit raised my blood pressure, and I had to take medication." "Oh, Mom, why do you complicate everything?" the man protested. "Marina is a normal, modern girl. If she doesn't want to stand by the oven, let her not. Nowadays, you can order ready-made food, and laundry can be sent to the cleaners. Cleaning can also be done by trained professionals. Why bother? This is not normal." "What's not normal?" "That a woman wants to look beautiful and well-groomed, rather than be constantly burdened with cooking, laundry, and cleaning. According to you, I'm burdened. Yes, all these years, I took care of your father. He always had clean, pressed shirts. He was always well-fed. And what delicious dumplings we used to make together. Don't you remember? And this girl of yours probably has no idea how normal people make dumplings or pies. And so where does she find clean laundry in the closet?" "Mom, this is my choice and my life," Lucho tried to argue with his mother. "She doesn't want anything from you except money. Just look at her. She's dressed like," the woman almost cursed, although it wasn't her habit. "Forgive me, Lord. Would your father ever have seen this overly made up, tastelessly dressed, and ill-mannered girl?" "Here we go again," Lucho rolled his eyes to the ceiling. "I'm going to bed. I have to get up early tomorrow." He left his mother's bedroom, closing the door behind him. Josefa stayed in her dressing table for a little while, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Since her husband's death, she had noticeably aged. Signs of fatigue had appeared on her face. Maybe it's time to retire? Josefa thought. She had thought more than once that it was time to stop working. Her health was failing more frequently, and her eyesight was deteriorating. Those computers she now had to deal with. Sonora Nieto found it difficult, while the younger generation effortlessly jumped into work processes and had no fear of working with any programs. Decision made. Tomorrow she would talk to her boss. If there was a successor for her position, she would clear the way for the younger generation and take a well-deserved rest. Lucho was in a good mood. His trading company had reached its first anniversary. As the director and owner, he could see the results. Profits were growing, the number of partners was increasing, and finally, substantial amounts were starting to settle in the accounts. To celebrate, he decided to thank his employees and throw a party. The team welcomed this news with enthusiasm. It was decided to free up a conference room, decorate it, and order catering with snacks, drinks, and dishes from a restaurant. On the appointed day, everyone gathered to celebrate the company's anniversary. Gabby and Marina were also invited. "Dear friends, colleagues," Senor Montero addressed the gathering. "I am delighted that we are celebrating the first birthday of our company today. I want to thank all of you for believing in the success of our business from day one and for doing everything to ensure its development, success, and profitability. Thank you." The crowd applauded loudly. "I didn't think your employees loved and respected you so much," Marina murmured, hugging Lucho around the neck. Throughout the evening, she made it clear to everyone that she had a direct connection to the director, that she wasn't just a friend but a beloved girlfriend. Marina had far-reaching plans for Lucho. The only problem might be his mother. A few days ago, Lucho had gifted Marina a luxurious fur coat. However, this gift was not initiated by him. They were just driving around the city when Marina saw a fur clothing store and asked to go in, saying she loved beautiful fur coats and mantles. Lucho couldn't refuse her. The girl drove him crazy, and he couldn't resist her romantic adventures. Navigating between racks of fur coats, jackets, and mantles, Marina tried on one after another. Finally, she came out to Lucho, who was sitting on a small couch, twirling around. The blue mink coat suited the tall and slender Marina perfectly, but the price tag dangling from the sleeve left Lucho baffled. "Darling," Marina puckered her lips, thickly painted with scarlet lipstick, "do I not deserve such a gift from you?" "Look for something else, my dear, preferably with one fewer zero in that price tag," Lucho suggested. "No, I want this one. It suits me perfectly. Don't you think the price of the fur coat is excessive? It's clearly overpriced. Abroad, you can buy it for much less." Lucho tried to dissuade Marina from buying it, but Marina insisted. Lucho had to agree. "Wrap it up," he told the saleswomen. Although his mood was slightly spoiled, Marina managed to lift his spirits again when she brought him to her place. He returned home around midnight. Morning coffee, prepared by Senora Nieto, invigorated and set the mood for work. Lucho stepped out of the shower and joined his mother. The woman carefully pushed a plate of sandwiches toward her son. "You came back late yesterday. Did you have to work overtime?" she asked Lucho. "No," he replied curtly. "Then where were you?" Lucho placed his cup on the table, hesitated for a moment, and then answered irritably. "Mom, do I look like a 5-year-old? Are you planning to control me my whole life? Where I want to be, that's where I'll be. When I want to, I'll come back. What's it to you?" "Calm down, I was just curious." Senora Nieto was even frightened. Her son had never raised his voice at her before. "You usually tell me what you've been up to, even how you spend time with Zor." Lucho got up from the table, leaving his half-finished coffee cup behind. "I'm out, I had work to do." "Sorry." He turned around and left the kitchen without even giving his mother a goodbye kiss. The conversation didn't go well, and the morning didn't start off on the right foot. In reality, Senora Nieto wanted to inform her son about her decision to retire. The day before, she had spoken to the HR manager at the factory, and it turned out that she had long wanted to place her niece in Senora Nieto's position. However, she had hesitated to say anything because Josefa had worked in the same place all her life and was respected by the management. The issue resolved itself. In 2 weeks, the woman would go on her well-deserved vacation, making way for the new generation. Now she was curious to see how her son would react. He would probably be happy. Josefa had already started making plans. Firstly, she wanted to buy a vacation package to a sanatorium. She had long wanted to visit Carlsbad in the Czech Republic. True, she would have to ask Lucho to return some of the money she had lent him a year ago to start his business. But it seemed that her son's business was doing well, and he would give her the money. Then, after returning from the trip, she would renovate her apartment. She would need to hire a good team of interior decorators to do the work quickly and efficiently, and in the renovated apartment, she could spend her remaining years. These were the plans Senora Nieto was making as she prepared to retire. But that evening, Lucho did not come home again. After work, he went to Marina's place, bringing along her favorite champagne. After a pleasant evening together, they lay in each other's arms. "Lucho," Marina murmured. "HM?" He replied weakly. "Will you marry me?" "HM? What does your mean? Yes or no?" She whispered seductively in his ear. "I will." "When?" Marina persisted. "Tomorrow." "Really?" Lucho finally came to his senses and looked at Marina. "Is there something wrong with us?" he asked, reaching for a pack of cigarettes on the nightstand. "I knew it," Marina said with hurt in her voice. "I knew you're just like all the other men. You come to me, you come, and then you marry some plain Jane. Where did you get that idea?" he asked, opening a window and lighting a cigarette. "If you wanted to marry me, you would have proposed by now. Am I just a short-term fling to you?" "Don't talk nonsense," Lucho replied dismissively. "Don't I give you money, buy you gifts, and fulfill your desires?" "You do, but getting married is something entirely different. When a person gets married, they prove their love. Do you love me?" I do. So? All right. If that's what you want, we'll get married. He stubbed out his cigarette. Then come to me, my kitten. Lucho couldn't resist Marina. A few days later, he went to Marina's place after work, and they headed to his home to tell Sonora Nieto about their intention to marry. Marina wore her new fur coat, which Lucho had bought for her. She wanted his mother to see that he spared no expense for her. Sonora Nieto didn't have any guests today. She wasn't feeling well. Her blood pressure had spiked, and she had to take medication. She lay down on the couch in the living room and turned on the TV. When she heard the sound of the door opening in the hallway, she didn't get up. She knew it was her son. "Mom, are you home?" "We're here," Lucho called out from the hallway, helping Marina take off her outerwear. Realizing that her son had returned with someone, Josefa got up from the couch. Lucho and Marina walked into the living room. "Hi. Were you resting or something?" the man asked. "Yes, I didn't feel very well," his mother replied. "Hello, Sonora Nieto." Marina tried to be polite, but she still stirred negative emotions in Josefa, which she struggled to hide. "Hello, Marina. Please come in. I'll put the kettle on." The woman was already heading towards the kitchen, but Marina beat her to it. "Don't worry. Sit down and relax. I'll take care of everything myself. Right, Lucho? Go ahead." He gave her a gentle pat on the lower back, but Josefa noticed her son's gesture and frowned, feeling even more dislike towards this girl. When everyone was seated at the table, Marina nudged Lucho with her elbow. She couldn't wait for him to tell his mother about their upcoming wedding. "Mom, Marina and I have something to tell you," Lucho began, trying to maintain a solemn tone but stumbling a bit. "Well, why are you hesitating, Lucho?" "Sonora Nieto, we're planning to get married," Marina announced loudly and clearly, not waiting for her fiancé to voice the news. Sonora Nieto sighed and stared into her cup. She really managed to hook him, she thought. "Yes, Mom, tomorrow we'll go and file the application at the registry office. Gabby has some acquaintances there, so we won't have to wait long. I think we can have the wedding in about a month. Is there a rush for some reason? Is she pregnant?" The woman nodded in Marina's direction, unwilling to even speak her name. "Are you out of your mind?" Marina exclaimed. "Pregnant? Definitely not. That's not about me. Usually, people rush when they've conceived a child out of wedlock, while normal people prepare for a wedding consciously, planning every step," Josefa reasoned, trying to speak calmly. "Lucho, did you hear that? According to your mother, we're not normal people. I'm in shock. Lucho, why are you silent?" Marina rambled loudly. "Please lower your voice," Lucho's mother asked. "I have a terrible headache." "Mom, we've made our decision," the man calmly stated. "It's not up for discussion. Marina and I came here to tell you this news first." "Well, thanks for that," sighed his mother. She sipped her coffee, took a chocolate candy from a vase, and slowly unwrapped it. "Mom, aren't you happy? Don't you have anything else to say?" "I'm happy when you're happy. That's all I can say," Josefa replied. "But since you've come with news, I want to share something as well." The couple stared at the woman, surprised. She calmly took a bite of the chocolate candy and sipped her drink. "Starting next Monday, I'm going on a well-deserved vacation. I've decided it's time for me to stop working. It's time to rest." "Congratulations, Mom." "It's about time," Lucho said. "While I'm getting treatment in the Czech Republic, some renovations will be needed in the apartment," Sonora Nieto continued. "So, I've decided to hire a team of interior decorators and let them do everything properly so that I don't have to worry about how to fix up the apartment later. I think this renovation will last me a lifetime." Lucho glanced around the kitchen. The apartment had been due for a refreshing renovation for a while now. Especially considering that modern materials and even hiring a designer could turn their modest place into a luxurious apartment. Due to this, Lucho, I'd like to ask you to return the money I gave you for your business. I'll need it now. Lucho stared at his mother, and Marina looked at him with surprise. It was clear that he was taken aback. His mother's request for the money back was unexpected. Honestly, he had already forgotten that it was thanks to her that he had been able to start his business so successfully and expand the company from scratch. I hope to get it next week because I'll need to pay for the vacation and make a deposit to the construction crew, his mother added. The woman calmly finished her coffee, seemingly oblivious to her son's confusion. Marina, on the other hand, didn't understand anything at all. All she knew was that it seemed like their wedding was on the verge of falling apart. For her, getting married to Lucho wasn't enough. She dreamed of a luxurious wedding with a limousine, a fancy restaurant, and a large number of guests. Marina was the first to break the silence that hung in the kitchen. You know what, Senora Nieto? You should be ashamed to ask Lucho for money. He's your own son, not some creditor. Besides, we have an important event coming up. Do you want us to celebrate our wedding in some diner hall? Be quiet, Lucho quietly said, but Marina couldn't be stopped. You're not exactly young anymore. You don't need much. Buy yourself a vacation in some local resort and enjoy yourself for a month. As for the renovation, it can wait another 2 to 3 years. Do you really think you need to entertain foreign princes here just to do some fancy renovation? Be quiet, Marina, Lucho tried to calm her down. No, Lucho, I won't be quiet. I'm almost your wife, which means I have a say in how your money is spent. If I say there will be a wedding, then there will be one, or you won't see me again. Marina practically jumped out of her chair, quickly got dressed, and slammed the door. Lucho attempted to chase after her, but Senora Nieto abruptly stopped him. Sit down. I haven't finished yet, she said. Flustered, the man plopped back onto his chair. Mom, the amount isn't small, he said. We should have been informed about these things in advance. Those funds have been in circulation until now. We'll need to pay for another batch of goods soon, and it's not just one truckload, it's several. Can you imagine how much money that is? I can't imagine it, and I don't want to think about it, Senora Nieto firmly stated. When you needed the money, I gave it to you without specifying any deadlines or any other conditions. I trusted your integrity. Now, they are needed for me, so please don't disrupt my plans. Mom, aren't my plans important to you? Lucho asked indignantly. I come to you, tell you I'm getting married, that Marina and I are planning to celebrate our wedding in a restaurant, and you don't react at all. How should I react, my dear? This is your life and your decision. What does it have to do with me? What do you mean, what does it have to do with you? At the very least, you should be happy for me, and at best, you should help me. No, my dear. Everything I had to do, I did for you. You're an adult now, long past your 20s. So, the word should no longer apply to me. It's now your responsibility to take care of and support your mother in her old age, or do you have a different opinion? You're being unfair and heartless, Mom, depriving me of the opportunity to get married, Lucho sadly said. And I'm not stopping you. Get married as much as you want and to whomever you want, but give me the money. Let's end this pointless conversation. Senora Nieto left the kitchen and went to her bedroom. Lucho sat there, deep in thought. He was trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without causing a rift with his mother and with Marina, all while not losing profits in his business. He really needed to make the payment for the next batch of goods, and it was a significant amount. He dialed Marina's phone number, intending to go to her to discuss everything and, at the same time, stay with her overnight. However, she didn't answer the phone. She's upset, Lucho thought. He turned off the lights in the kitchen and left the apartment. Sitting in his car, he headed home to his lover. He noticed that the light was on in her window as he approached Marina's house. But when he rang the doorbell, no one answered. He began knocking on the door with his fist. Marina, open up. We need to talk. He heard footsteps behind the door, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "What do you want?" Marina asked through the door. "To talk." "We've already talked. I thought you were a man, but it turns out you can't make a decision without your mommy." "I can." "Darling, please, open up," Lucho pleaded. The door opened quietly. Lucho entered the hallway. Marina was standing there, her back against the wall, pouting and looking down. Her demeanor clearly showed how hurt she was by Lucho and his mother. "Come on, don't be mad, darling," he tried to embrace her, but Marina pushed him away. "Tell me, who do you want to live with, your mommy or me?" she asked. "Of course, with you, my love." "Then why do you completely disregard me? Do you think I should go to the wedding in a bathrobe and our guests will eat potatoes and cutlets?" "Don't worry, it won't be like that. We just need to wait a little longer," Lucho reassured her. "I don't want to wait. Can't your mother put up with her silly old lady whims?" "I don't know, dear. But we'll figure something out together, won't we?" He held the girl close to him and gently pushed her towards the bedroom. Marina gave in. She knew all of Lucho's strings to pull, and she could skillfully manipulate him. Later, lying in bed, they devised a plan for their next steps. "What if we send your mother to one of her relatives?" Marina asked. "Why?" Lucho didn't understand. "So she doesn't get in the way. Don't you see? Let her stay there for a while, and we can have our wedding. When she returns, you can give her the money, or at least part of the debt." "Well, she doesn't really have any relatives," Lucho thoughtfully lit a cigarette. "There were only her parents, but they died a long time ago when I was still a child." "But didn't her parents leave her any inheritance after their death? Since there's no one else, she should have received something. I beg you, don't be ridiculous. What kind of inheritance could there be in a remote village? The house is tiny, and it's probably falling apart by now. I remember my mother once went to visit their graves and told me that almost all the houses in the village were abandoned. It's all deserted there." Marina sat up, looking closely into Lucho's eyes. Her gaze was triumphant. "So, that's the solution, my dear," she chirped, smiling. On the appointed day, Lucho returned home on time. Senora Nieto noticed that he was acting strangely. He kept trying to offer her things, to serve her, and then he invited her to have coffee together. After the recent argument, they had hardly spoken. However, it seemed that her son had come to his senses and realized that his mother was right. Lucho poured aromatic drink that he had brewed himself into cups and brought over the sugar bowl. "How's business, son?" the woman asked. "Everything's good. We're working as usual, moving forward step by step." "You know, not a step backward," Lucho replied with a smile. His smile seemed forced and unnatural to his mother. "What have you been up to?" "I went to a travel agency," Josefa began to explain, but her son interrupted her, asking for a clean hand towel. She went to fetch it from the room, and he quickly took a small vial from his pocket and dripped its contents into her cup. It was a sedative. "Here, I've brought it," his mother handed him the towel. "Thank you, Mom," he thanked her. "Now we can have coffee in peace. You drink too." During their conversation, the woman finished her whole cup and suddenly felt weak. "Something doesn't feel right, Lucho," she said. But her son had already picked her up and was carrying her into the bedroom. He placed her on the couch and rushed to the hallway to open the front door. "Did she fall asleep? Did everything work out?" Marina asked as she entered the apartment. "Yes, she seems to be asleep." "Hurry up. We need to act before she wakes up." Lucho carried his mother in his arms, and Marina grabbed a blanket and a pillow from the couch. They left the apartment and went to the car. He placed his mother on the back seat, putting the pillow under her head, and covered her with the blanket. Opening the trunk, he threw in warm clothes for Josefa that Marina had gathered, as well as several bags of groceries. Slamming the trunk shut, Lucho and Marina set off on their journey. Driving onto the country road, Lucho accelerated. He drove as fast as he could, fearing that his mother might wake up and their plan with Marina would fail. 5 hours later, they reached the remote village where Josefa was born and raised. They found her parents' house. While there was hardly any snow left in the city, here it was knee-deep. After pushing through the gate, Lucho struggled to open it, and then he unlocked the door to the house. He returned to the car, carried his mother inside, and laid her down on the bed. "Where should we put the groceries?" Marina asked, standing in the doorway, holding the bags. "Over there, on the table," Lucho pointed. He covered his mother with a blanket and placed his coat on top to keep her from getting too cold. "Let's go, Marina." They closed the door and drove away, their headlights casting light on the abandoned houses with boarded-up windows. When Josefa woke up, she felt horribly cold. She struggled to open her eyes, and her head was pounding. She attempted to get up, but she fell back onto the bed, feeling completely weak. "Where am I?" she thought. Wooden walls surrounded her, and faint daylight seeped through the boarded-up windows. It took her a moment to realize that she was in her childhood home. But how had she ended up here? Josefa couldn't understand. The last thing she remembered was Lucho giving her coffee, and then darkness. "Is there anyone here?" A male voice called out. The door rattled, and Josefa tried to say something, but her tongue seemed stuck to the roof of her mouth. "Hey!" The voice called again from outside. "I'm here," she whispered hoarsely, her throat hurting terribly. The door opened, revealing a man with a gray beard, dressed in a warm jacket and a winter hat. He rushed to Josefa, who was lying on the bed beneath a pile of items. "Who are you? What's happened to you?" he asked, patting her cheek. "Are you okay?" "It's cold," she whispered. "I'll help you in a moment, just wait." The man grabbed a blanket, wrapped Josefa in it, took off his own jacket, and covered her with it too, tucking it in around her. "How did you end up here?" "No one's been here in 100 years." She looked at him, unable to utter a word. The man hurried outside in just a sweater, returning a minute later with an armful of firewood. "We'll get the stove going soon, and it will warm up. Just lie down and wait a little." After a few minutes, the logs in the stove crackled, and Josefa saw the glow of the flames through the cracks. The stove's door was slightly ajar, and it didn't seal tightly. "It seems like you've decided to settle in here for good. You brought quite a bit of food with you," the man commented while examining the contents of the bags on the table. Josefa turned her head, realizing that Lucho had brought her here to abandon her. She had been against his wedding, and he wanted her to hand over the money. Meanwhile, the stranger placed a fabric backpack on the table. "I'll pour you some hot tea now. It'll warm you up quickly," he said, retrieving a thermos from his backpack. He unscrewed the lid, which also served as a cup, and filled it with the aromatic hot beverage. Sitting down next to Josefa on the bed, he helped her sit up. "Here, hold this. It's very tasty, thank you," she said, taking a few sips. "What is it?" "I make it myself. It's made with rose hips, hawthorn berries, and some other herbs," he replied. "Feeling better?" "Yes, I'm warming up already. So, I was walking and noticed tire tracks, and they led to this house," the stranger began to explain. "Nobody's been in this house for 100 years, and suddenly, there are guests. So, I thought I'd come and see who's arrived, and here you are." "And who are you, exactly?" Josefa asked. After sipping the hot tea, she felt much more alert. Her headache had disappeared completely. "Oh, I apologize, I'm just an old fool," the man started to apologize. "I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Antonio, the local forester." "Antonio? How strange," Josefa mused. "Why is that strange?" Antonio didn't understand. Josefa sat up on the bed. She felt warmth spreading through the house. The crackling logs in the stove not only warmed her body but also her soul. She looked around the room. The faded wallpaper had almost completely peeled off the walls, the ceiling was damp, and old curtains hung at the windows. Her mother had sewn those curtains when Josefa was just a girl. "This is my home, you know? I grew up here, living with my parents. Then I went to the city to study and stayed there. My father was named Antonio. He used to be the forester here. Everyone in the area respected him. He was such a good man." Antonio listened first with surprise and then let out a deep, hearty laugh. "Haha, it turns out I'm also Antonio, just like your father. What a coincidence. I never knew we had the same name. People did tell me that there used to be a very good forest ranger here, but that we shared the same name, I had no idea." Antonio laughed again. "How did you end up here? Where are your relatives, your family, and the car you arrived in?" "I saw the tire tracks. It seems like an SUV or some off-road vehicle." "I don't know," Josefa said sadly. "It seems like I have no more relatives or family left." Seeing her become downcast, the stranger took her hand. "Don't jump to conclusions. Life is full of surprises." He stood up, placed his hands on his hips, and said with renewed energy, "Since you've decided to stay here, we'll have to tidy up the house, and I'll help you. Do you mind?" "Of course not," Josefa smiled. Who would refuse help in such circumstances? "Thank you." Throughout the day, Antonio and Josefa cleaned the house. Antonio started by removing the boards from the windows and fixing the crooked door. Josefa tackled cleaning the floors and windows. She prepared to wash some old curtains, but Antonio stopped her. "We can't hang this old stuff in the house, Josefa." "So, should I live without curtains?" "We'll hang new ones," Antonio said confidently. "Where will we find them?" Josefa asked, surprised. "If we search well, we'll find them," Antonio replied mysteriously. Josefa shrugged her shoulders, not understanding. The day was approaching evening. Josefa had already managed to cook some potatoes, sliced some sausage, and opened a can of stewed meat. "Your son turned out to be considerate. He didn't dare to leave his mother in the cold forest without food," Antonio remarked sarcastically, but immediately regretted saying it. Josefa became sad again, lost in thought. "Yes, it turns out that way. You raise your only son, spare nothing for him, and he leaves you in the woods, in this cold cabin. Don't worry like that, Josefa. People live everywhere, but this place is your own. This is your homeland. And the Canadian forest, it seems to hold the memories of our ancestors. It protects those born and raised under its pine trees. Everything will be fine, I know it," Antonio smiled. Josefa wondered what had brought him here. He certainly wasn't a local. Josefa and Antonio became friends. The forest ranger visited the woman every day, helping with household chores. Antonio repaired the furniture that remembered Josefa as a little girl, fetched water, and helped with firewood. Josefa fed him delicious lunches. "I've seen that in some houses, there's electricity. People live there. It seems like they are leaving sometimes?" she asked Antonio one day. "Yes, they live there. About 10 houses are still occupied in the whole village," he replied. "Mostly those whose children don't need them anymore and lonely elderly folks." "What do they do here?" "Those who have livestock tend to them, they have gardens, they gather berries and mushrooms in the forest. They catch fish in the lake, dry it and smoke it. There's not much else to do here. Even the television doesn't always work." "Do the houses have televisions?" Josefa perked up. She was getting bored on her own. She missed watching her favorite TV shows in the city in the evenings. "They do, but the reception sometimes goes out, especially in winter." Josefa suddenly got up from the table and went to the cupboard where her things were hastily packed by Lucho. Among these items, she found her bank card, where her salary and pension should have been deposited. "Look," she handed the card to Antonio. "What's this?" Antonio didn't understand. "This is my bank card. Please, let's go to the store and buy a television tomorrow, I beg you, she said, her hands clasped to her chest. Antonio thought for a moment. The nearest store was about 80 kilometers away. It would take the whole day to make the trip there and back. But Josefa looked at him with such pleading eyes that he couldn't refuse. Okay. We'll go tomorrow in my car, he agreed. Senora Nieto smiled happily. She was growing fonder of this strong man with such a familiar name. He reminded her a lot of her father. 2 months passed, and summer arrived. One warm evening, Antonio and Josefa were drinking herbal tea in the yard. Antonio had crafted a small table, and Josefa had knitted a tablecloth for it. The trees rustled softly around them. Enjoying each other's company and the tranquility, Josefa suddenly thought that nothing happens by chance. Perhaps she should have returned here long ago. She surprised herself. She enjoyed preparing the garden for planting and setting up the house to make it cozy. Pepita, Antonio began, addressing her, we're both not young anymore, we live as hermits here, and yet we don't seem to be bored. Where is there to be bored? I'll be planting the garden soon, and then I'll be taking care of it, Josefa replied to him. Yes, gardening, of course, that's a pastime. But I want to be more than just friends. In short, Josefa, let's live together. Josefa looked at Antonio in surprise. His kind eyes held so much hope, warmth, and life experience. We're already together most of the time, Tony. No, I mean let's live together, run the household together, and in the evenings, we can watch your TV shows. He looked so touching in his uncertainty that Josefa couldn't resist and extended her hand. All right, Antonio. Things are indeed more fun together. With joy, the man hugged Josefa, held her close, and stroked her gray hair. One day, when Antonio returned from the forest, he brought a small lynx cub with him. The animal was injured, weak, and barely alive. What's wrong with it, Tony? Josefa asked, pushing aside a basin of freshly washed laundry. It got caught in a trap, poor thing. Looks like poachers are at it again. I had to save the little guy. My, what a little guy. But he's bigger than a healthy cat. Get the first aid kit, please, Antonio requested. He treated the wound on the lynx's paw, applied ointment, and bandaged it. He'll stay with us for now, and we'll see how it goes. They repurposed an old doghouse for the lynx. They had to replace the boards and create an enclosure with metal mesh. They named the lynx Pancho, after the previous owner of the doghouse. Though he was a dog and not a wild cat, the pet turned out to be unusually affectionate. He would lick Josefa's hand when she petted him or tended to his bandages. A few days later, Antonio returned with a large box. It contained about a dozen chicks. Here we go, laying hens, he proudly announced, showing Josefa the little chicks huddled at the bottom of the box. Now we'll always have fresh eggs. Oh my, Tony, where are we going to keep them? Josefa exclaimed, raising her hands in disbelief. That's not a problem. Tomorrow morning, I'll start building a chicken coop, and then I'll build a barn. We'll get cows, goats, geese, ducks, and piglets. We'll have our own farm. Josefa just nodded, smiling, and marveled at Antonio's industriousness. He had no trouble preparing the forest for construction, so Antonio decided not to skimp. In just a month, they had built not only a cowshed, a chicken coop, a pen for geese and ducks, and a rabbit hutch, but also a new bathhouse. Josefa's joy knew no bounds when the first wisp of smoke emerged from the chimney. We'll renovate the house eventually, too. We'll do everything while we still have the strength, Antonio promised. Once a month, Josefa and Antonio would go to the city to withdraw money from Josefa's bank card and collect Antonio's salary. They also visited the market, where they sold eggs, milk, and poultry meat to traders. The prices weren't high, but they didn't want to deal with the trading themselves. They had to return home to take care of the farm. After making the necessary purchases, they headed back home. One day, as they were returning home, they noticed a car on the forest road. It's not ours. Probably some tourists, Antonio speculated and pulled up next to the unfamiliar car. Hello. Do you need help? Good evening, a man in his 40s approached Antonio. The car broke down. I've tried everything, but it won't start. Let me take a look, offered the forester. He peered under the hood of the foreign car, touched a few things, and fiddled around. It's in bad shape. It needs repairs. But where can I get it repaired around here? The man asked. I checked the GPS, and there are no nearby towns or service stations. Two boys, around 8 to 10 years old, jumped out of the man's car, followed by a woman. Antonio looked at the family and decisively said, Let's go to our place. You can spend the night there, and I'll tow your car to the service station in the morning. Do you have a tow rope? The men attached the foreign car to Antonio's vehicle, and they all took their seats. Antonio towed the broken car to the village. Here we are. Pepita, invite our guests, he said. Josefa led the woman and her children into the house. It turned out they had come from a faraway place. They had long wanted to see the Canadian sights, but their car had let them down. I'm Natalie, the woman introduced herself. And these are our sons, David and Joel. The boy sat down near Tony with Lynx and looked at it in amazement. Everything in this house and yard seemed exotic to them. In the evening, everyone gathered around a table outside. Antonio and Natalie's husband, Carlos, grilled meat on a barbecue, while the women prepared vegetables and greens. Antonio somehow produced a bottle of moonshine for the occasion. To getting acquainted, to our meeting, and to fixing your car quickly, he said, pouring shots. Everyone present raised their glasses and cheered. It was a wonderful evening. Natalie put the children to bed, and they were so exhausted they barely made it to the bed. The hosts and guests continued their conversations over fragrant tea with forest herbs. The next day, they towed Carlos's car to the service station. It turned out the car wouldn't be ready until the following day, so the men returned to Antonio and Josefa's home. The guests significantly livened up the hosts' lives. All day, the boys played with the animals, fed carrots to the rabbits, carried hay for the cow, and collected eggs in the chicken coop. They also enjoyed fresh milk. Carlos and Antonio chopped firewood and stacked it neatly, while the women cooked meals. In the evening, everyone went to the lake, swam, and took a boat ride. Upon their return, a genuine wood-fired sauna was waiting for them. These were fantastic weekends. Thank you so much. The grateful guests thanked their hospitable hosts. It was a wonderful weekend. We couldn't have imagined such a great getaway here. And we loved it. The boys exclaimed in unison. Come back to visit us, Antonio said, shaking Carlos's hand before their departure. Don't doubt it for a second. We'll come back, and we'll bring friends with us, the man promised. Watching the car with their new friends drive away down the street, Antonio turned to Josefa and said, I have a feeling, Josefa, it's time to start building guest cottages. Throughout the summer, Josefa worked on the garden beds, harvested crops, and preserved food for the winter. Antonio seriously started building an extension to the house. He enjoyed hosting guests, and deep down, he hoped Carlos would keep his promise and come for a vacation at their place. The man and the woman ventured into the forest together to pick berries and mushrooms, make jams, and do pickling. And through the long winter, Josefa spun yarn from rabbit wool, knitted warm socks, mittens, and other items. Winter passed, and spring arrived. The elderly couple's homestead gradually expanded, and their chores increased. One evening, as they were finishing digging up a plot for planting potatoes, several cars pulled up to the house, one after another. Who could that be, Tony? Josefa wondered. Let's find out, Antonio replied. Antonio went to the gate, and Carlos was walking towards him. Well, hello there, master. Carlos called out upon seeing Antonio. How have you been? Are you both healthy? We're healthy, thank God. Pepita, Come see who's come to visit." The two men embraced each other, delighted to meet again. "Can you accommodate us for a while?" "We want to stay for a week, go fishing, walk in the woods, just relax," Carlos asked. "Why are you even asking?" "We're only happy to have such guests," Antonio smiled, patting Carlos on the shoulder. "But, Tony, I'm not alone. Will you accept all of us?" "How many of you are there?" The forester inquired. "Is this everyone coming to us?" "Yep." "Then lead the guests in. We'll figure it out." People started pouring out of the cars, men, women, children. Josefa was taken aback as the young women surrounded her, shaking her hand, introducing themselves, asking where to take their belongings and food. "Inside, girls, inside," Josefa replied, still bewildered. Gradually, the commotion subsided. There was so much hustle and bustle. The women started cooking, and the men set up several tents in the yard. Such clever people, Josefa thought. The children were provided with beds inside the house, while the adults settled in the yard. Noise, laughter, and the joy of children's voices filled the previously quiet home of Josefa and Antonio for a whole week. The kids eagerly fed the animals, went to the lake with their parents, and played outside the gates. The women helped Josefa, even though she initially refused assistance, as they had come here to relax. The men had plenty of tasks to keep them busy throughout the day, and they enjoyed the variety. Antonio even took the guests hunting, and they loved fishing. As they bid farewell, Josefa prepared gifts for her guests: socks and mittens made from rabbit wool, jam from forest berries, pickled and salted mushrooms, dried and smoked fish caught by the guests themselves. They hugged tightly and couldn't part ways, having grown so close during that week. And when the city dwellers left, Josefa found money and a card with good wishes hidden under the tablecloth. "Look, we earned our first money from our homestead," Antonio smiled joyfully. He felt that soon there would be more guests in their home, and he was right. 1 week later, another group of 3 families arrived. "We're here because of Carlos. He said you have an amazing vacation spot here," a man named Lucho initiated the conversation. "It's a great place for relaxation. Come into the yard," Antonio invited. Word of mouth spreads, and goodness attracts more of the same. Several years passed imperceptibly. Now, from May to September, tourists from various cities kept coming to visit Josefa and Antonio, some for a day or two, others for a week. Antonio managed to build several summer cottages, bought 2 boats, and set up a smokehouse. People from metropolises and bustling cities enjoyed vacationing in the midst of wild, untouched nature. The hosts never asked for or set any rates for their guests since they received much help from them. However, tourists always left money, which Antonio invested in new constructions, animal feed, and other necessary things. On that day, they were expecting more guests. "Look, someone's coming," Antonio called out to Josefa. "Seems like they're ours." A black SUV stopped at the gate, and a man stepped out of it. He looked in astonishment at the solid house with beautiful carved trim, the unfamiliar man, and the links in the enclosure. "No, Tony, it's my son," shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand, Josefa said quietly. She took a few steps forward, smiled, and tilted her head. "Hello, son." At the sight of his healthy, cheerful mother, Lucho's legs gave way. He hugged his mother and burst into tears. Josefa stroked her son's head and spoke softly, using words that Antonio had once said to her. "This is our homeland, my son. The Canadian forest seems to hold the memories of our ancestors. It protects those who were born and raised under its pines. Everything will be fine. I know it."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.